So now I believe we have some time for some audience question and answers here with our panel. So I'd like to open it up for any questions. I can bring the microphone back to y'all if you're in the back. So does anyone have any questions? Okay. Well, let me get this going. Yeah, I just kind of have to kind of test.
So as someone mentioned, working with GPS providers, has there been any movement on that? Any, like with Google Maps or ways to be able to send alerts to drivers that are noted to be going the wrong way?
Well, we've just begun that project. We have identified a company that can help us with that technology. We currently have content analysis on our cameras to pick up traffic accidents and debris. It's much like the airport technology. If something that starts there that doesn't belong there, the cameras know and send alerts back. It's basically just programming it to pick up the direction of traffic. And once that is it, there are some cell phone providers willing to work with us once we get that technology to issue an Amber Alert type thing to a geo-fenced area. So we are trying to get that, and from what they say is once we get that base done, that geo-fenced alerting should be fairly easy on their part. It's a matter of convincing people to allow it on their phones.
I see a couple experts in the room, so I'll try not to speak too ignorantly on this, but my understanding is Japan, some of the automakers in Japan, not any of the U.S. vehicles they sell, have already implemented basically their Garmin version of stopping or disabling the vehicle if they detect that that vehicle's they're going in the wrong direction. So that's a step in the right direction, obviously.
Just first to compliment all of you for your efforts in this most important arena of trying to improve safety of our transportation system. And I wanted to ask if any of you were involved at the national level or perhaps international level to advance the deployment of smart technologies to address this issue. My experience is that the technology's there, perhaps we're just not thinking through it all completely. For instance, just as an example, the first iPhone was marketable in June of 2007. So it's only been on the marketplace for 8 years, but iPhone actually knows the direction that every phone is moving in. And so that's a technology that could be deployed because almost every vehicle is going to have some kind of smartphone in place. And you mentioned that in San Antonio you don't have radar set up in a ubiquitous enough way to detect all these activities, but sensors at a relatively low cost could be deployed across a network that could pick up the wrong way movement of the cell phone, if you would. So I'm not suggesting that's the solution, but knowing that fleets turn over in about a 10 to 12 year period of time, and OnStar and Sync, depending on GM or Ford, can disable a vehicle if they understand that there's a need to. They can actually just shut off the fuel supply and the ignition system. So what are you doing nationally and internationally to advance these things so we're not coming up with these elaborate, very expensive solutions to a problem when technology is already out there?
One of the things we looked at before we looked at our app was just that. Our theory is that the cars are getting smart, and even if it's not OEM equipment now, there are simple add-ons to your car, and even that's where we went with the cell phones. It is a 10-year turnover for vehicles, but there's still somebody holding on to that 1980 Datsun because it's going to make a comeback. And they just don't want to do anything with it. However, that same person has the Samsung Galaxy S6 or the iPhone, whatever we're up to now, sitting on their hip the entire time. One of the things when we were working with some of the manufacturers was the level of right now it's not as granular as it needs to be to shut you off at a ramp. We don't know if you're on the road, on the frontage road, or in the parking lot. You could be driving in front of the restaurant in the parking lot that's just 50 to 60 feet from the road, and your car shuts down because it thinks you're going the wrong way on the highway. So right now, the level of the GPS wasn't in their minds enough to take it and say, okay, if we can tell the person, hey, you're going the wrong way, we went and said, hey, then why can't we tell the people in the area, if you're in the parking lot, that's fine, just don't get on the tollway right now or get on the freeway, or if you're going that direction. So you're absolutely right. When we looked at that with manufacturers, part of their issue was we don't want you pulling into the Taco Bell drive-through right next to it, and your car's shutting off because it thinks you're going the wrong direction because it picked it up. But it is moving that way, and as GPS, as everybody knows, GPS used to be if you were within 100 yards, you were great, and it is starting to come down into the sidewalk level accuracy as they talk about. But we weren't confident enough to try to roll something out with that in cars. We did work with some manufacturers that are now going to become OEM parts on some of the Chrysler vehicles. They're a startup in Dallas. They're a little plug-in that basically makes your car a Wi-Fi hotspot and broadcasts everything to everybody around you. It's one of the first starts to connected vehicles. So we're going that direction, we will be there soon. I know we will be, but we've started with just your cell phones instead of the car because of that major issue.
So I think Eric hit the point on nail on the head with the GPS accuracy. But I think one thing to remember too, and we've had these discussions in groups before, is if you're going to shut the car down, where is the car? Because if the car is in an active lane of travel, yeah, it's not going anymore, but it's still disabled in an active lane or on the ramp. And so we even have to think about ways of, can we take control of that car somehow and actually know it gets on the shoulder before we just disable it? So there's a little bit more conversations about, you can't just kill it. There is someone in Germany, I saw a video just the other day, that they are just, the car comes to an abrupt stop in their video, and you're like, well, that would just be in the lane. And so there is still some other questions we have to ask on how do we get that car safely out of the way, disable it in the mix of the rest of the traffic going on, the design of the ramp or where they happen to be. So I think we're headed that way. Like Eric said, there's just a lot of questions to answer to piece it all together, but we're moving there faster than slower, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, my question is for Melissa, and then later on maybe NTTA and TxDOT can comment on lowering the signs. Because right now NTTA is using 2 feet high signs on their projects. And TxDOT standards we are using 3 feet high signs. So I don't know what was the crash testing result. It was done for 3 feet high or 2 feet. And is there anything we can do within our region to try to reach consensus between NTTA and TxDOT in coming up with just agreeable sign, maybe 2.5 feet high, basically? Because I know the media is focusing too much on this, and the second we implement our own projects, they're going to be looking at us under the microscope saying, how come NTTA using 2 and TxDOT is using 3? So I'll start with TTI comments and then maybe NTTA and TxDOT. Thank you.
I'm actually going to jump on that one a little bit because Melissa didn't help us as much with the 2 foot. We had some other partners in TTI helping us. But as I mentioned, we couldn't find any research that went into 3 foot. We looked through national committee minutes when it was adopted at FHWA level and so forth. And forgive me, anybody on the national committee, but all it basically did was look at, some people are doing it 1 foot, some people are doing it 7 foot, so let's compromise and do 3. We couldn't find anything that showed, because some states were doing it at 1, some were doing it 2, some were doing it 4, some are 6, some are 7, depending on what state you were doing it randomly. So we just took a systematic approach and went back and said, okay, what is our goal? Our goal is to capture headlights. So if our goal is to capture headlights, and really it is, you have that split second. They turn, they're looking, and that's it. You've got fractions of a second to catch their attention. So we thought, okay, let's look at the standard 3 foot. When we looked at 3 foot at the time, remember this was back in 2009 and 10, there were no crash tests for the 3 foot mounted do not enter sign, and there were concerns it would fail. So we didn't want it, we thought, okay, if it's concerns it's going to fail, let's look at see why 3. When we couldn't figure out why 3 and couldn't figure out through the stuff, we realized headlight height in Texas, the lowest you can go is 24 inches. So if we're trying to catch their attention, lower the sign to the headlight height of 2 foot. So the difference we found was 78% brighter from 3 foot to 2 foot because you're capturing it. And the highest you can get is 54 inches. So in the do not enter, we've captured your headlight height in that sign. Now, all that being said is we were doing this back in 2009 and 2010 when actually, as you know, the TxDOT MUTCD didn't allow this at all. So we were partnering really well with TxDOT. And TxDOT has been a great partner through this entire thing. But why we went to 2 foot was just that. We did crash test 2 foot and it passed without any issues. So back in 2010, when we couldn't find anything crash tested at 3 foot, and we have more accidents of people going off the road and hitting our signs than we do wrong way drivers. So we were truly concerned about the right way driver and how it's impacted, because it's all about everybody's safety. And wrong way driving accidents about 0.6% of our accidents. Well, to put something out there and say, well, we don't care if the right way driver gets hurt, we were a little concerned with that. So that's part of the reasoning we went to 2 foot. Now, I applaud TxDOT for lowering the signs, because quite honestly, we've seen a 56% reduction in our 2 foot sign. But will it be the same at 3? We don't know. That's why we're looking at jurisdictional approval to try 2. And if we find that 2 foot is effective, TxDOT's been a wonderful and a great partner along the entire way. We'll share data. We've been sharing data. But if TxDOT finds 3 foot is effective, we have no issues with 3 foot, because there are some areas where 2 foot is blocked by a guardrail, a fire hydrant, or some sort of obstruction that maybe we'd have to go to 3 foot. So the fact that TxDOT's doing 3, we applaud them for coming on with us and helping us. And we've been sharing data so well with San Antonio, with Dallas, with Fort Worth, with Austin. We're looking forward to seeing what the results are. Because if we do anything, and I understand the media, and the media is going to do what they are going to do. We have them up in Dallas. You have them in Austin. But our big thing is we're doing something. We can't forget, as Dale mentioned, these are intoxicated individuals, and there is some personal responsibility we have to put onto them as to stopping them in their tracks before they get in the car. But just lowering the signs, we know it's effective. 3 foot should be effective, and we hope we see the same results with TxDOT, because one life saved with a lowered sign is worth it.
Mohammed, for the Houston district, will follow what Traffic Operations Division tells us to do, which is 3 feet. So we'll follow what they tell us, because they know they attend all the meetings that we do not attend with Ashton and the rest, and we will do what they tell us to do, okay?
So speaking, this is me talking, not TxDOT talking, obviously, but so you have to remember that it has a timeline to it, as Eric hinted at. So when they started looking at 2 feet, it was before there was ever the allowance to reduce a sign size. So you start down a path, and there were the reasons with the visibility, et cetera, they went down that path. In the meantime, the FHWA came out with the ability to lower to 3 foot. We were studying the 2 foot for a while. For several years, the data showed either no significant difference to a slight. Then we were able to finally have enough before and after data that we could see the real impact of the lowered signs from 2 foot. But right now, 2 foot requires a request to experiment from FHWA, and that's what they're going under at NTTA. To be able to implement lowered signs in Texas quickly, you have to go with what's in the manual, which is 3 foot. And just to note, other states, if they say lowered, a lot of states, some of them are 4 foot, some of them are 1 foot. So you have to be careful on what the media says, because lowered is a really large group of signs. It's not just 2, it's not just 3. Across the United States, it's a variety of heights. It's just not 7. That's what we can say. So